Bound by fate and captivity, Tony and Ziva face their deadliest threat in Season 24. The cold rain fell over the abandoned naval shipyard as Tony Donoso stepped out of an unmarked SUV. Every instinct he had developed during his years with NCIS screamed that something was wrong. The encrypted message he had received only hours earlier contained a single sentence. "If you want to see Ziva alive again, come alone." For Tony, there was never a choice. Thousands of miles away, Ziva David sat handcuffed inside a dimly lit underground bunker. Bruised but unbroken, she carefully studied every camera, every guard, and every weakness in the room. She had survived impossible missions before, but this time felt different. Her captors weren't interested in ransom. They wanted revenge. The mastermind behind the operation was a former intelligence commander whose family had been destroyed during a classified mission years earlier. He blamed Tony and Ziva for everything. Now he planned to make them suffer together before ending both of their lives. Back in Washington, Director Parker received disturbing satellite images showing unusual military activity along the coast. McGee quickly matched encrypted communications to a long-forgotten terrorist network once believed to be dismantled. "They're rebuilding," McGee said quietly. Jessica Knight looked at the monitor in disbelief. And Tony just walked straight into their trap. Within minutes, the entire NCIS team launched an unauthorized rescue mission, knowing they were already running out of time. Meanwhile, Tony followed the coordinates to an abandoned warehouse. Every room was empty except for a single photograph lying on a steel table. It showed Ziva alive, but chained. Written on the back were 3 chilling words. "You're too late." The building suddenly exploded behind him. Tony barely escaped the fireball as armed mercenaries surrounded the compound. Gunfire echoed across the docks, while Tony fought with nothing more than his instincts and determination. He wasn't thinking about survival, he was thinking about Ziva. Captured after an exhausting battle, Tony was brought before the mysterious leader. "You spent years protecting each other," the villain smiled. "Now you will watch each other die." Hours later, Tony was thrown into the same underground prison where Ziva had been held for days. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ziva quietly smiled. "I knew you would come." Tony laughed despite his injuries. "You really need to stop getting kidnapped." Their reunion lasted only seconds before guards separated them once again. Hidden inside her jacket, however, Ziva had managed to steal a tiny metal key. She wasn't planning to stay in prison much longer. As night fell, the prison lost power for exactly 12 seconds. That was all Ziva needed. She unlocked her restraints, silently eliminated 2 guards, and freed Tony before alarms echoed throughout the underground complex. Together, they moved through narrow tunnels with the precision that once made them one of NCIS's greatest field teams. Tony covered every corner. Ziva neutralized every threat. Neither needed to speak. Years apart had never erased the trust between them. Outside, Parker's rescue team finally located the hidden bunker, but heavy explosives blocked every entrance. "We can't get inside," Torres shouted. Parker refused to retreat. "If Tony and Ziva are still breathing, they're fighting." Inside the fortress, the villain activated his final plan. Missiles hidden beneath the facility began counting down toward launch. His objective wasn't simply revenge anymore. He intended to trigger an international crisis that would force governments into open conflict. Tony stared at the massive control panel. "We stop this together." Ziva nodded. Like always. As explosions rocked the bunker, McGee managed to breach the security system remotely while Casey identified the launch sequence. "You've got exactly 4 minutes," McGee yelled over the radio. Tony sprinted toward the control room while Ziva fought wave after wave of heavily armed soldiers. Every second mattered. Every decision could mean life or death. When Tony finally reached the launch console, he discovered it required 2 simultaneous security overrides. One switch stood beside him. The other was across the collapsing room beside Ziva. Flames separated them. Smoke filled the air. Tony reached out. "So, One last impossible mission? Ziva smiled through the chaos. Our favorite kind. Together they counted. 3, 2, 1. Both switches slammed downward simultaneously. The missile launch instantly aborted, but the damaged bunker began collapsing around them. Massive concrete beams crashed from the ceiling as Tony pulled Ziva toward an emergency tunnel. Behind them, the defeated mastermind refused to surrender. Instead, he detonated explosives throughout the complex. The underground fortress disappeared beneath a mountain of fire. Outside, Parker watched the earth collapse inward. Silence filled the rescue team. Then, two figures emerged through clouds of dust. Tony supported Ziva as they slowly walked into the morning sunlight. Both exhausted, both injured, but both alive. The NCIS team rushed toward them. McGee smiled with relief. You two really know how to make an entrance. Tony looked toward Ziva before answering. We're still working on subtle. Everyone laughed for the first time in days. Later that evening, the team gathered aboard the USS Midway to watch the sunset. For the first time in years, Tony and Ziva stood quietly without discussing missions, enemies, or unfinished cases. Only peace. Tony finally broke the silence. We've spent our lives running toward danger. Ziva squeezed his hand. But fate always brings us back. Far across the ocean, inside an unknown command center, another mysterious figure watched surveillance footage of their escape. He quietly closed the file labeled Operation Denozzo David before opening a second classified folder. Its title sent chills through the room. Phase 2. As the screen faded to black, one truth became impossible to ignore. Tony and Ziva had survived their deadliest mission yet, but the war against the shadows had only just begun, promising even greater danger, deeper conspiracies, and the ultimate test of their unbreakable bond in the battles still to come. Bound by Fate and Captivity, Part 2, The Shadow War begins. 48 hours after the destruction of the underground fortress, Washington seemed peaceful again. News outlets reported that an international terrorist network had been dismantled during a classified operation, but very few people knew the truth. The mastermind behind the attack was dead, yet his final words echoed in Tony Denozzo's mind. You stopped me, but you cannot stop what's already in motion. Those words refused to leave him. Inside NCIS headquarters, McGee continued searching through the recovered hard drives from the bunker. Thousands of encrypted files had survived the explosion, but one folder remained impossible to unlock. Casey adjusted her glasses as endless streams of code raced across her monitor. This encryption isn't military, she said. It's something completely different. Different how? Parker asked. Casey looked uneasy. It's evolving. Everyone in the room fell silent. Suddenly, the screen unlocked by itself. A single video began playing. The image revealed a masked figure sitting inside a dark room. If you are watching this, the stranger said calmly, then Phase 1 has failed. Begin Phase 2 immediately. The video ended. No names, no locations. Only one symbol appeared before the file deleted itself forever. Tony recognized it instantly. I've seen that symbol before. Every pair of eyes turned toward him. It belonged to a covert organization even Mossad considered too dangerous to investigate. Ziva's expression changed. I thought they were destroyed years ago. So did I. Thousands of miles away, inside an abandoned monastery hidden in the mountains of Eastern Europe, dozens of armed operatives stood in complete silence. A tall woman wearing a black tactical uniform walked slowly toward a large digital map. Her name was Elena Varga. Unlike ordinary criminals, Elena had never sought money or power. She wanted control. Entire governments had spent years hunting her without success. Now she smiled as reports confirmed Tony and Ziva were alive. Excellent, she whispered. They survived exactly as planned. One of her commanders looked confused. You wanted them to escape? Elena nodded. They're bringing us everything we need. Back in Washington, Ziva couldn't ignore the growing feeling that someone was watching them. Every parked vehicle looked suspicious. Every unfamiliar face seemed connected. Even their apartment no longer felt safe. Late that night, she quietly searched every room while Tony checked every security camera. Nothing. No evidence. Yet both knew the danger hadn't ended. As Tony locked the front door, he noticed a small envelope lying on the floor. Neither of them had heard anyone approach. Inside was only a photograph. It showed Tony, Ziva, and their daughter Tali playing on a beach several weeks earlier. Written beneath the image were 6 terrifying words. Beautiful family. It would be tragic. Tony's blood ran cold. For the first time since joining NCIS, fear replaced determination. Not for himself, for Tali. The next morning, Parker immediately ordered protective surveillance around every member of Tony and Ziva's family. No chances, he said. Not this time. Knight and Torres personally escorted Tali to a secure government safe house while McGee traced the photograph's digital watermark. After hours of investigation, he discovered something impossible. The picture wasn't taken weeks ago. Everyone looked confused. It was taken yesterday. Tony immediately stood. They're here. Across the city, Elena watched hidden surveillance feeds from inside a luxury hotel overlooking the Capitol. Every move Tony made, every phone call, every vehicle leaving NCIS headquarters, she saw everything. One of her operatives approached. Should we eliminate them? Elena smiled. No. They're leading us directly to Project Atlas. What if they discover it first? They won't. Her confidence unsettled even her own soldiers. Later that evening, Casey uncovered another clue buried inside the bunker's damaged servers. Project Atlas wasn't a weapon. It wasn't money. It was a classified intelligence archive containing decades of undercover identities from agencies around the world: CIA, MI6, Mossad, Interpol, NCIS. If those files reached the wrong hands, thousands of undercover agents would be exposed overnight. Entire intelligence networks would collapse. Parker immediately understood the stakes. We're not protecting information anymore. We're protecting lives. Tony and Ziva volunteered to infiltrate a suspected safe house connected to Elena's network. The abandoned mansion appeared empty. Dust covered the floors. Furniture had been left untouched for years. Yet Ziva sensed movement. Someone is here. Without warning, every door slammed shut. Steel barriers sealed every exit. Hidden speakers filled the building with Elena's voice. Welcome. I've waited a long time to meet both of you. Gas slowly poured through the ventilation system. Tony covered his face. It's another trap. Ziva fired several rounds into the vents, but the gas continued spreading. Suddenly, dozens of holographic projectors activated throughout the mansion. Every hallway displayed false images, fake enemies, fake exits, fake explosions. Reality itself became impossible to recognize. Separated by the illusions, Tony shouted Ziva's name. No answer. Only Elena's laughter echoed through the darkness. Then a single gunshot rang out. The mansion fell completely silent. Outside, Parker's tactical team raced toward the property after losing contact with Tony and Ziva. Torres kicked open the front gate just as smoke poured from every broken window. We're too late. But deep beneath the mansion, inside another hidden chamber, Tony slowly regained consciousness. His hands were chained once again. Across the room, Ziva was trapped inside a reinforced glass cell. Standing between them was Elena Varga herself. She removed her black gloves, smiled confidently, and spoke the words neither of them expected. I don't want to kill you. I want you to help me steal Project Atlas. Tony stared at her in disbelief. You've lost your mind. Elena leaned closer, her voice calm and chilling. No, Tony. You simply haven't learned the truth about who really created NCIS's darkest secret. The heavy steel doors slammed shut behind her. Tony and Ziva exchanged a worried glance. For the first time, they realized this mission wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about a conspiracy that reached far deeper than either of them had ever imagined. Bound by Fate and Captivity, Part 3, The Truth Behind Project Atlas. Tony's wrists ached against the steel restraints as Elena Varga stood silently in front of him. Across the room, Ziva watched every movement, searching for even the smallest weakness. She had learned long ago that the most dangerous enemies were never the loudest, they were the patient ones. Elena slowly placed a weathered classified file on the table between them. "You both spent years believing NCIS was protecting the world," she said. "But what if I told you someone inside the agency created the very threat you're fighting today?" Tony shook his head. "I don't believe a word you say." "You will." She opened the file. Inside were decades-old photographs from covert operations that had never appeared in any official record. One image immediately caught Ziva's attention. It showed a younger Leroy Jethro Gibbs standing beside an unidentified intelligence officer outside a secure military installation. Ziva narrowed her eyes. "Where did you get these?" "They came from Project Atlas." Tony stared at the faded photograph. "Gibbs never told us about this mission. Because he couldn't." Elena's voice remained calm. Everyone connected to Atlas signed an agreement that could never be broken. Meanwhile, Parker, McGee, Knight, Torres, and Casey transformed the NCIS conference room into a full-scale command center. Every satellite, surveillance feed, and intelligence source was focused on locating Tony and Ziva. McGee finally traced the signal that had briefly appeared beneath the abandoned mansion. It wasn't the prison. It was an elevator. "Leading where?" Parker asked. McGee enlarged an underground map. Everyone froze. Beneath the mansion stretched an enormous Cold War bunker extending nearly 3 miles underground. Casey whispered, "That's not a hideout. It's a city." Deep below the surface, Elena guided Tony and Ziva through a maze of reinforced corridors. Thousands of inactive computer servers lined the walls. Dust covered forgotten military equipment. Rusting armored doors bore faded government insignias from countries that no longer existed. "This place was built during the Cold War," Elena explained. "It became the headquarters for Project Atlas." Tony looked around. "Who funded all this?" Elena smiled. "Everyone." As they entered the central operations chamber, dozens of massive screens suddenly came to life. Maps of every continent covered the walls. Thousands of names scrolled across encrypted databases. Undercover agents, safe houses, black budget operations, entire intelligence networks. Everything. Ziva immediately realized the horrifying truth. If someone copies these files, every undercover operative on Earth becomes a target. Elena finished. Tony turned toward her. "So why show us?" "Because I don't have the final encryption key." Silence filled the room. "The last access code belongs to someone you both trust." Back at NCIS headquarters, Casey recovered another damaged recording hidden inside the Atlas archive. The file had been corrupted for nearly 20 years. She restored only a few seconds of audio. A familiar voice spoke clearly. "If Atlas is ever compromised, Dinozo and David must never learn the truth." Everyone looked stunned. McGee replayed it. The voice belonged to Gibbs. Parker slowly leaned back. What was Gibbs protecting? No one had an answer. Inside the underground facility, Elena stopped before an enormous titanium vault. A retinal scanner glowed beside the entrance. "This is the final archive." Tony folded his arms. "If you expect us to help you open it, you've wasted your time." Elena looked almost disappointed. "I wasn't asking." She nodded toward 2 armed guards. The soldiers dragged an elderly man into the room. His hands were bound, his face bruised. Tony stared in disbelief. Dr. Malcolm Pierce. Years earlier, Pierce had designed secure intelligence systems for multiple agencies before disappearing without explanation. The scientist looked at Tony with exhausted eyes. "Don't let her open it. It's worse than you imagine." Before he could continue, one of the guards struck him across the face. Hundreds of miles away, Tali sat inside the government safe house coloring a picture while Knight quietly watched over her. Suddenly, every light inside the building flickered. The security alarms activated, then instantly shut off. Knight reached for her weapon. Something wasn't right. Outside, a delivery truck stopped at the front gate. The driver handed security officers official-looking government credentials. Everything appeared normal, until Torres called over the radio. "Knight! Nobody authorized a delivery." The guards turned too late. Smoke grenades exploded across the entrance. Masked operatives rushed through the chaos. "They're after Tali!" Knight grabbed Tali's hand and sprinted toward the emergency exit as gunfire erupted behind them. Back inside the Atlas bunker, Elena finally revealed her true objective. She didn't want money. She didn't want revenge. She wanted leverage over every intelligence agency in the world. "With Atlas," she said, "governments won't dare oppose me." Tony stepped closer, despite the rifles pointed at him. "You'll start a global war." Elena's expression never changed. Peace has always belonged to whoever controls fear. At that exact moment, alarms echoed throughout the underground complex. One of Elena's commanders rushed into the chamber. "They've breached the outer perimeter." Parker's rescue team had finally arrived. Explosions shook the bunker as NCIS agents fought room by room through heavily armed mercenaries. Torres and Knight cleared corridors with incredible speed. McGee disabled electronic defenses from a mobile command vehicle outside. Casey redirected the facility's power grid, plunging entire sections into darkness. For the first time, Elena looked genuinely concerned. She turned toward Tony and Ziva. "This is your final opportunity. Join me." Neither of them hesitated. Tony smiled. "You still don't understand us." Ziva stepped beside him. "We don't betray family." Enraged, Elena drew her pistol and pointed it directly at Dr. Pierce. "If I can't have Atlas, then no one will." Her finger tightened on the trigger. A deafening gunshot echoed through the chamber. The room fell silent. Smoke drifted through the air. No one could immediately see who had been hit. As the dust slowly cleared, Tony's horrified expression revealed that everything had changed in a single heartbeat. Bound by Fate and Captivity, Part 4, The Last Stand. The smoke lingered in the air as every person inside the Atlas chamber froze. Tony's heart pounded. Ziva instinctively reached for the nearest fallen weapon. Then the haze finally cleared. Dr. Malcolm Pierce was still standing. The bullet had missed him by inches. Instead, Elena's own commander collapsed to the floor, a crimson stain spreading across his tactical vest. Everyone turned toward the entrance. Director Parker lowered his service pistol. "I told you," he said calmly. "Nobody hurts my agents." The silence shattered. Mercenaries opened fire from every direction. The Atlas chamber erupted into chaos. Tony tackled Ziva behind a reinforced console as bullets tore through computer screens. Sparks rained from the ceiling while Knight and Torres pushed deeper into the room, forcing Elena's soldiers to retreat. McGee's voice crackled through the earpieces. "I've hacked into the bunker's internal security. You've got 6 minutes before the emergency lockdown seals every exit." "6 minutes?" Torres shouted. "We've survived worse." Elena wasted no time. She slammed her hand onto a hidden control panel. Massive steel blast doors began closing throughout the underground complex. At the same time, Project Atlas initiated an automatic data transfer. Thousands of classified identities started uploading to encrypted servers around the world. Casey stared at the progress bar from NCIS headquarters. "Oh no!" Parker heard the panic in her voice. "What is it?" "If that transfer reaches 100%, every undercover agent on the planet will be exposed." "Can you stop it?" "I can slow it down. But someone has to destroy the central server manually." Tony looked toward the towering server core in the middle of the chamber. "I'll do it." Before he could move, Ziva grabbed his arm. "We do it together." Tony smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." Across the compound, Knight raced through smoke-filled corridors searching for Tali. The rescue convoy carrying her had been ambushed only minutes earlier. Surveillance footage showed the attackers entering the bunker with a hostage. Knight's blood ran cold. Tally is inside. Torres immediately changed direction. Then we're bringing her home. Meanwhile, Elena retreated deeper into the Atlas vault. She activated dozens of automated defense drones hidden inside the ceiling. Metallic machines descended into the chamber, opening fire without hesitation. Tony and Parker returned fire while Ziva leaped behind cover. The drones were fast, too fast. McGee quickly analyzed their software. They're using facial recognition. Casey suddenly had an idea. If I overload the camera system... Seconds later, every drone began receiving thousands of false images. Friend became enemy. Enemy became invisible. Confused, the machines started attacking each other. Explosions echoed throughout the bunker. Torres laughed. I officially owe Casey lunch. Far below the main control room, Elena reached a secure observation deck overlooking the Atlas reactor. She contacted an unknown figure through an encrypted satellite link. They're inside, the distorted voice replied calmly. Excellent. Elena frowned. They're about to destroy everything. They're supposed to. For the first time, Elena looked genuinely confused. What? The Atlas archive was never the objective. The transmission ended. She stared silently at the disconnected screen. Someone had manipulated her from the beginning. Back in the control chamber, Dr. Pierce finally revealed the truth. The data inside Atlas isn't the greatest secret. Tony looked at him. Then what is? Pierce pointed toward the enormous reactor beneath the bunker. Atlas powers something much larger. He hesitated. A satellite network capable of controlling military communications across half the world. Everyone stopped. Parker whispered, Dear God, if someone activates that system, they could blind entire governments, Pierce finished. The countdown suddenly appeared on every monitor. Communication override 500-549. Elena stared in disbelief. I didn't start that. Neither did anyone else. Somewhere beyond the bunker, someone else had taken control. Knight finally located Tally inside a locked laboratory. The frightened little girl ran straight into Ziva's arms the moment the doors opened. Mama! Ziva held her tightly. It's okay. I'm here. Tony knelt beside them, relief washing over his face. We're getting out together. For one brief moment, the war disappeared. They were simply a family again. That moment ended when Elena appeared above them on a steel platform. She no longer looked confident. She looked desperate. You don't understand, she shouted. We're all being used. Tony raised his weapon. Then help us stop whoever's behind this. Elena slowly lowered her pistol. Before she could answer, a sharp crack echoed through the chamber. A sniper's bullet pierced the glass wall behind her. Elena stumbled backward, staring down at the wound spreading across her chest. She looked toward the darkness high above the platform. There he is. Another shot rang out. Elena fell over the railing and disappeared into the burning reactor below. No one even saw the sniper. Only the echo of his rifle remained. Tony looked upward. A lone figure dressed entirely in black stood on a distant catwalk. His face remained hidden beneath a tactical hood. He never spoke. He simply watched. Then he disappeared into the shadows. McGee's voice returned over the radio. The countdown just dropped below 3 minutes. Tony looked at Parker. We've been chasing the wrong enemy this whole time. Parker nodded. Elena wasn't the mastermind. No. Ziva tightened her grip on her pistol. She was only the beginning. As alarms screamed louder and the mysterious countdown raced toward zero, Tony realized their greatest battle had not yet been fought. The invisible enemy had finally stepped onto the board, and this time, he already seemed to know every move they would make.